Let's welcome David Harper.
Well, I think that'd be the loudest applause I get this evening.
So you would describe yourself previously as somebody who was agnostic. Yes, that's the term you use in your book, The God Conundrum. For those who don't really know what that word means, how would it best have described your type?
Well, I think it describes somebody who just doesn't know. He thinks, as I thought, that there's something more to life than just living and dying. Even as a young boy at the age of 4 or 5, it used to disturb me. Why am I alive? I'm going to die one day. My parents are going to die. Sorry for getting a bit depressing. But guess what? It's a reality. And I used to wonder why. What is the purpose of life? And so I always felt that there must be something. There must be something more than this atheist way of living or way of thinking that we're just meat and bone and we're designed to live, breed and die. Thought there was more. And I did search for more. I did. I looked at the Buddhist ways, a lot of the Eastern ways, in actual fact. I looked at the Celtic ways. I looked at sort of getting in touch with nature and the universe. And then I found Stoic philosophy several years ago, which was very helpful. It's a good philosophy. It deals with a lot of the hardships in life, and it kind of teaches you to take hardships and suffering and twist them around and make them into a positive. So I was very, very much an anatta Stoic. So the unsure of God. And if there is a God, who is he? Which one is he? It was all a bit confusing for my brain. So that's where I was. Confused and disappointed that I didn't know throughout my whole life, but always searching for answers and thinking that I would find it in business, in making money, in being on TV, traveling, moving to another country, thinking that must be my purpose. If I get on TV, that will be a purpose for me, that will be a leaning for me, and that might answer just a little bit the reason why I'm here. And it never did. Never did. So again, a bit like getting the new car, if you're ever lucky enough to order a new car, you're going to choose the colour, choose the trim, it's very exciting. But it's a bit disappointing when you get it. Because you think, well, what next? What else is going to make me happy? Nothing's really making me fully happy. Nothing ever did. Not that I've never been okay miserable and was unhappy. But I knew that there was much more, certainly than material wealth. Material wealth never, not that I'm rich, but material wealth, if ever I got any, never brought me any joy. Never. I think, why?
So you search, you try Buddhist philosophy, Stoic philosophy, Eastern philosophy. Dare I ask what you thought of
Christianity? Well, if I'm honest, I thought it was a bit dusty. And a bit old-fashioned. I mean, looking around, quite obviously that's not true. And not exciting enough, not different enough. I wanted something different. Christianity to me was something that was preached at me when I was at school. And it was always around. It was on the village green. It was in the library. It's in our government system. I understood it was the foundation of Western civilization. I understood that. But I didn't think it was from modern society, because I'd been taught that the Bible was nonsense, that the Bible was a fairy tale made up by man to control man. And I'd been listening to people telling me this who had never read the Bible. I've only now discovered this, by the way. And I had never read the Bible, never picked up a Bible. I didn't know anything about it. So I assumed it was made up by man, and it had evolved somehow over centuries until the printing press came along and the final incarnation of this fairy tale was put together.
So that was your assumption?
That was my assumption. It didn't mean I didn't believe that there was a God, a creator. I did, but I didn't think that the Bible had very much to do with it. That's where I was.
Interesting. And so your book is called The God Conundrum.
It's a great word. I love the word conundrum, yeah.
I have to confess, I did have to look it up. And conundrum means it's a difficult problem to solve.
A challenging problem. It's a very challenging problem, and it's been challenging me all my life. So that's why I called it the God Conundrum.
So because you started with that being the big question,
Yeah.
and the book is a result of a lot of, not research after the fact, but the research you did because you were searching.
I was desperately searching.
So what's set you off putting this research together?
Well, it was quite a long process. So my daughter lives in London and has been in London now for about 10 years. And about 5 or 6 years ago, she became exceptionally unhappy, unwell, and then supremely depressed and was self-harming and had suicidal thoughts. But more than that, very, very involved. And nothing I could do, nothing a mum could do, nothing any of us could do could help. And I felt utterly useless, and I was completely useless and a major failure because I couldn't help my daughter. The doctors tried. She was on all sorts of treatments and antidepressants and therapy sessions, one-to-one. She's in central London. She gets pretty good care, actually. But nothing was fixing her. And we were desperately unhappy. And I don't mind admitting that when the phone rang, and it was my daughter, Hetty, and it would come up Hetty, and I would hesitate answering the phone because I didn't know what she was going to be like. And I knew that I wouldn't be able to help her. And even worse than that, I even had times when I thought that maybe it's someone else ringing me on Hetty's phone to say something terrible had happened. But then something changed. So she said to me, "Dad, I'm going to church." It was somebody had suggested to her that she was spiritually bankrupt. And doctors had literally said to her, "We can't help you. There's nothing else. We can't give you any more drugs." She was self-medicating, I'm sure, with alcohol, I'm sure. That didn't help. And so she tried Christianity. Now, she had an understanding of Christianity, of course, because we're all cultural Christians, aren't we, effectively? And so she started going to church, and she found a lovely church in South London, a pastor and his wife, and they took her under their wing, and they cared for her really, like parents, like I could or should have been able to do. But they taught her about Jesus, and they fed her, and they looked after her. And over a period of time, I noticed in our conversations on the phone that she was getting lighter. That's the only way I can describe it, brighter, because she was so terribly dark. And I monitored it critically, thinking that this was a honeymoon period. It would go away, would go back to the depression. But it did. She just got better and better. And we talked about Jesus on the phone. And she was joyful talking about Jesus. And I was getting an interest in him. And I know that he was knocking, there's no doubt. Yeah. I was still suspicious. And then in 2024, she came home for Christmas. I'd seen her a few times in London, but only for a day or so. And she was with us 2 weeks. And it was then that I saw the transformation in this person from deep dark to bright light. And she was just beaming. And we went to Durham Cathedral, York Minster. We visited churchyards. We were reading gravestones. And we were just immersed in this stuff. And she was telling me about Jesus, not ramming it down my throat, just telling me how he changed her. And then, just as she was leaving, I thought to myself, this is real. This is a real transformation. This is not going away. She's fixed what has fixed her. So I decided to research Christianity for the first time in my life. And I said to my wife, right, I'm going to research. My first Google search was, what is it about Christianity that changes people so dramatically? Okay, and I Googled it, and I thought it would take 2 hours or thereabouts to get to the bottom of it all. Yeah, I know, exactly. Within half an hour, I was diving down the most fascinating rabbit holes of information, because what I wanted was science, history, documentation, testimonials, eyewitness accounts. I wasn't that interested in the things I'd been told. I'm spiritually transformed. I wasn't that interested in that because I thought that was more of a blind faith, a bit of just a decision to believe something as fits to. I wanted the hard evidence. So I just started finding it. And then 11 months later, I compiled it all into the book. But a few months in, dogmatically looking for evidence. I looked, first of all, for evidence of the universe. Now, whenever I was young, thinking about how was it created, it used to blow my mind of, I don't have the capacity to understand this. But actually, when you look at it, it's not rocket science. There's only two options I discovered, and it's true, there's only two. The universe either made itself by accident out of nothing, or there's an intelligence behind it. So I looked at it, and it seemed pretty clear to me very, very, very quickly that the universe is finely tuned. We've got gravity, we've got water, we've got oxygen, we've got all these things. It's like a complicated clock. One cog, one spring out of place, the whole universe implodes. Mathematically, it is agreed, it is impossible for this to happen by accident. So I looked into, gravity, that if you were to think of gravity as a piece of string tied from Earth to the sun, it would take you 20 years flying in a jumbo jet non-stop to get to the sun. If you tied that string tight, and that represents perfect gravity, and you moved that string by less than 1 millimeter, the whole world would implode. Wow. Everything would implode. It is so minutely, finely tuned. It is not logical or rational to think that the universe made itself by accident. And when you do look at that, by the way, the atheist scientists, they can't explain how it happened. They just say it happened, but they can't explain.
For a long time, they fought the idea that there was a start to the universe.
That's right. They had it as an eternal thing. And they accepted with it being internal. They just accepted it as that. But when they realized that there was a beginning, Einstein discovered this in 1916. We call it now the Big Bang. But they say that there was nothing there. There was literally nothing. I mean, if we emptied this room of people in chairs, there would be something. There would be light, there would be particles, there would be oxygen. In the place where the universe was made, there was nothing. And it was created in a space smaller than a human hair, an atom size. And instantaneously, science will tell you that everything was created faster than the speed of light. Matter, space, oxygen, water, mathematics. The scientific laws were all created in a nanosecond. And nothing we now know for certain can be made out of nothing. You can't make something out of nothing. So it was just totally logical to me that there was a creator. So I got that. And then, and it doesn't take long, and it is in the books, and it's 10 pounds. We don't want to give everybody away that series. And then I looked at life, and I thought, okay, well, I was taught evolution was true. Let's go. I never had any discussion with my biology teacher. And I said to him something along the lines of, well, shouldn't be that there's a bit of intelligence here employed? And he absolutely basically told me to shut up and said, look, Harper, it just happened, right? Evolution just happened. So you look at that, I read Darwin's Theory of Evolution, published in 1859. 1859, Queen Victoria was on the throne. We were riding around on penny farthings. It's pre-electricity. We didn't have loos inside our homes, pre-free education, and the stamp, the penny red in actual fact, the stamp was the internet of the day, and it would take 10 days to send a message from London to Edinburgh. This is the period, this is the scientific period when the theory of evolution was born, and you can drive a horse and carriage through it. It makes no sense. And I looked at DNA at the same time that I was studying the New Testament. And in the New Testament, Jesus says, God loves you so much, he knows everything about you. Every hair on your head is numbered. And for 2,000 years, this was looked at and scoffed at and said, oh, it's ridicule, it's hyperbole. Well, we now discover that with DNA, he was scientifically correct. Every hair on your head is numbered. So when I looked at DNA, you have a DNA number, I have a DNA number, they're all unique, and it's basically a computer program. And DNA is in every cell of your body, and you've got 30 trillion cells. And it's minuscule. It's 1/100th of 1 millimeter. And in that DNA is your number, and it's 3 billion digits long. Now, I love cars, so I thought to myself, well, if I put my digit, or your digit, on a car number plate, how big would it be? And a car number plate is 20 inches long, thereabouts, or 7 digits. You put your 3 billion digit on there. In word perfect, number perfect order, because if it's out of order, one mistake, it doesn't work, it doesn't live. It's perfect. It's 300,000 miles long. And it will wrap around the world 12 times. And it's in every fiber of your body. You click a toenail, your DNA number is in there. And it just makes no logical sense that this happened by accident. But then you've got to watch Richard Dawkins, yeah, I know, I agree with you. Now, and he argues that DNA is proof that it's all by accident, because apes are 96% similar to humans. Well, it's been downgraded now to about 86%. But when you look at this, that they're identical to us or similar to us in their DNA, an ape's DNA will not work in your body. It just won't work. But then you look at it, we're 74% similar to our pet dogs in our DNA. We're 80% similar to the duck-billed platypus, 60% to a garden slug, 60% to a banana, and you're 60% identical to a blade of grass. Now, this doesn't mean that your relatives were blades of grass. It doesn't mean that. It just means that there is a creator, and that creator uses DNA, the life-giving supercomputer, in all living things, including a bunch of flowers.
Yeah.
It's like a cake. You know, every cake needs sugar, but not every cake is related. But every cake needs a cook. And so every life form, it makes sense. There is a creator. And DNA is the one life-giving form, but DNA can't produce life unless it's alive. So where did the first life form come from? Scientists cannot explain it. Darwin couldn't. So it goes a bit more in detail in the book, but I get to that point. So there is a creator of life, and I don't believe in evolution as in the Darwin thing. We do evolve within species, like the human male 40,000 years ago in Europe was 6 feet tall. That was the average height because of climate and diet and all of these things. 30,000 years later, he was 5'4". Now the average height is 5'9". So we micro-evolved within species, but we don't grow trunks, we don't grow wings, and we don't become giraffes. And it has never been proven. So, and then I thought, right, well, I'm getting this. This is good. There's a creator of the universe. There's a creator of life. What about Jesus? Is he the creator? And then I heard Ricky Gervais on TV with one of his classic stand-up gags. He said, there's been 3,000 gods. What makes yours the real one? And it's a killer. Yeah. It's a killer lie. But then I realized it's not a killer lie.
No, it logically doesn't make sense. It's a discount everything.
Yes, that's right. It's fantastic because it proves that humanity has searched for God, which means we are programmed to look for God. We have a hole in us that can only, we know from experience that, be filled by God. It cannot be filled by anything else. Money, prestige, looks, health, it can't be filled. So we've searched for God, and we've made gods of sun and gods of rivers, and so you can discount thousands of gods in a nanosecond. It's not the god of the Zambezi in Yami Yami. That isn't the river god is not it. It's not the Celtic gods. The Romans had hundreds of gods. So did the Greeks. You can tie it down. The only god, if you search for the only person, the only religion that says it can prove that it has God is Christianity. There's only one person that came and said, I am the way, I am God, and I'm going to prove it to you. And so I looked into the life of Jesus, and it's given me chills back up my spine because I discovered that Jesus was a real person. I wasn't sure. He really lived. You can prove it categorically. There's more written about him than any other person from antiquity. So we can prove that he lived, we can prove that he preached, we can prove that people said that he performed miracles. And we can prove all of this, and we can prove that he was persecuted by the religious authorities, the Roman overlords, and he was tried as basically being a rebel, almost a terrorist. He was persecuted, and we know that he was killed and his body disappeared. We can prove that with documentation. So I got to this point, I thought, well, hang on a minute. The only thing I now need to look at is the resurrection.
Yeah.
If the resurrection is true, everything is true in the Bible. And so I looked at 2,000 years worth of resurrection investigations. You can find them yourselves. In the book, I give you the 8 best claims against the resurrection. The 8 best.
Yeah. When you say against, it's that people say, this is how it didn't happen.
This is how, yeah, he didn't die. Yet the body was stolen. It was an imposter. It was all made up. They got the wrong tomb. The very best claims against it. Not one of them can debunk the resurrection. And then you look at the disciples, the people that were really with Jesus. These are the biography writers who really lived. We can prove it. They said that he said he was going to do this. They tell us what he did in life. And they all admit that they ran away when he was arrested. And when he was crucified and killed, they ran away in fear of their own lives because the same was going to happen to them. Yet then they say, we've seen him. He came back. He spoke to us. He taught us. He lived. He said he was going to resurrect. He resurrected. And each and every one of them then lived a life of decades of absolute persecution, ridicule, torture, and ultimately the majority of them a terrible death, instead of saying that they did not see this thing happen. People have investigated this. At no time in history has anything like it happened. Nobody dies for a lie. Nobody. I say there's a glass of water there. I will die if I had to and instead of denying that there's a glass of water. I know that water is there. They knew he was there. So I came to an intellectual decision that he is who he said he was. He is God. So now I'm in this dilemma of confusion in truth, of I've got all this evidence, and now it starts to really distress me, because I think I'm becoming one of those born-again Christians. I know it's scary. And these are the sorts of people that I used to run away from. And so my emotions were changing, and it was whilst I was writing about the crucifixion. So I give a very long description of the crucifixion because I felt that it was important to know what Jesus went through. And now we know what we do. Now I know, now you know that Jesus went through this voluntarily. This is absolutely shocking beyond belief. You have to get an understanding of it. And even when I read it now, it brings tears to my eyes. And at the time, I found it really difficult to finish it. But as I was working on this, of course, I was studying the Bible and everything else, I started getting these emotional shifts. I had it in my head, but I started getting this sense of a joy that I'd never felt before. It was like, do you know when you find something that you've lost? A teddy red plague sense to me, so you've lost it, you've just found it, you've got $500,000 quick. Do you imagine that feeling? I was getting that feeling. Or like I just remembered something. And I didn't know where it came from. I couldn't hold on to it. It was like a dream that just go away. And it kept coming. And my emotions changed. I felt like laughing or crying. And I kept thinking about Jesus. I dreamt about him. I spoke about him. I researched him. I wrote about him. And I felt like I was getting to know it. And then something fundamentally changed in me. So I decided that Jesus was God, but I wasn't really getting the full-on emotional feeling, apart from these sort of emotional waves. And then a memory came to me of a video that I watched with Professor John Lennox. Have you seen Professor John Lennox from Oxford University? He's a mathematician and a great Christian, a real powerful Christian, a lovely man, charming man. And I saw him in an interview, and somebody said to him, how can you tell? How do you know Christianity is true? He said, well, it's funny. He said, because the older I get, the more convinced I am that it's true. He said, let me give you an example. 6 months ago, I was teaching a girl at Oxford. She was very depressed, really unhappy, deeply, deeply depressed and disturbed. I saw her recently and she was changed. She was full of light, full of joy, full of happiness. And I said to her, what's happened to you? The last time I saw you, you were so unhappy. She said, I found Jesus Christ. And it was that moment that I find it so difficult because it's so joyful, but it just is so incredibly powerfully emotional. It was at that moment that he was effectively describing Hetty, my daughter. And after about 3 months of ruthlessly looking for evidence, hard evidence, that I was used to looking for, antiques, I suppose, it hit me like a steam train that nobody could fix my daughter. No medicine, no doctor, no therapy session, nothing, no advice for me or anyone else, nothing. I realized in that moment that she was well, and she described her feeling, the way that she said to me, Dad, I wake up every morning feeling like the luckiest girl in the world. And it was then that I realized that Jesus Christ saved my daughter's life. And that was it. The thing here, it dropped. Someone's just said it. It drops. It happens. And it fell, the 18 inches, and it fell into my heart and my soul. And I talk about evidence for the soul. Atheists say we don't have souls. There's so much evidence from neuroscientists that we have souls. And it fell into my soul. And I, in that moment, fell in love with Jesus. And I became one of those people. And it has changed my life.
That's wonderful, wonderful. And you can't buy it. No, you certainly can't. And and you couldn't just reason it either. You know, all the research, all the work. Yeah, it was that what we call in the book the 18-inch drop.
Yeah,
that happened in that moment.
And it took me a few months for this to happen, but I know a great girl in Barney Castle. I go to the Christian Fellowship and we do Bible classes. That really stimulates it. And she had the moment in one experience. She went to one church, listened to one testimony, and found Jesus 30 years ago, and she is evangelical. She's absolutely magnificent, full of life and full of light. So it can happen. We're all very different. It took me months, and I know many people who it's happened to, but not as dramatically as me. It's like that they wake up one day and they realize that actually, I think I love God. So, and that's what it is it not? It's a love. We know what love is. We love our partners and our parents and our pets and our jobs and everything, and our churches and our friends. And the love of God is just another form of love. And that's what being a born-again Christian is, I feel, that you fall in love with God. And it changes everything. It does.
Let me ask you about that, because you've talked about how your daughter's life was transformed, at that she was completely changed.
Yeah.
What change have you seen in your life?
A peace. You know, I mentioned earlier that I've always looked for a purpose and a meaning. Why do I do the things I do? Why am I alive? And I feel that there is a purpose. I feel a joy. It's more than happiness. We can have happiness by buying a car or whatever, but getting a new watch, a new pair of shoes gives you a bit of happiness. But it doesn't give you that joy, a sense of joy. That's not to say that I don't wake up unhappy sometimes and I don't have problems. I do, like everybody else. But I have just a constant companion of joy. And it's very hard to explain really to someone who it would be hard to explain to me 2 years ago, but it's real and it's tangible. You can feel it. And then another thing is I don't have a fear of death. Yeah. I used to fear death terribly. I could never talk about it. I really couldn't. I used to fill me with dread. But now I know that life is, it's not that. If we're lucky, we get 100 years. Very lucky. If that's 100 years, if we're lucky, we get that's not that anymore. It's that. It's like it's endless. And so there is an eternity. And I truly believe it. I feel it with every fiber of my being. So I no longer fear death. I don't want to die like tomorrow or anything. Right. I do feel like I do have a purpose now, yeah. And I do. And I think I do have a calling. It doesn't make me special. We all have a calling. If you're a Christian, you have a calling. You have a thing to do. And I'm in a very lucky position that I can do what I'm doing with the book and everything else. And that's what I want to do. And if it means me not doing TV, then so be it. If it means they don't employ me, that's fine. I'd rather come here for a cup of tea and sell some books than go get paid a load of money to go and give a talk to 300 bankers or get a TV job. So that it's purpose, peace, and joy, and no fear of that, which is freeing, isn't it? It really is freeing.
You have to all the question I wasn't going to ask, but also since you went there, and then I'll ask, how you had pushback?
Oh, I have had pushback. I have. And I think anybody who's been through what I've been through will have had it as well. And it's something that is predicted in the Bible. And everything that is predicted in the Bible comes true. I've studied the Bible now, and I'm absolutely convinced that there is answers for everything in the Bible. It is the best self-help book ever written. I'm convinced it's supernatural, and I'm convinced it's the Word of God. And it predicts it will happen. And yes, I've had family pushback. I've seen terrible times with family, with friends, with work colleagues, with ridiculing behind my back. I was having dinner with a friend of mine who owns an antique centre in Lincoln the other night, and he said, the Antiques Road Trip will film me, and I won't mention names, says, I know we're recording. And one of the experts, someone I know, ran into the antique centre, and she went over to the guy that owns this antique centre, and she said, Rob, what has happened to David Harper? He's gone mad. So, yes, good. Call it mad, call it whatever you want. So, yeah, there's been a lot of pushback, and very few mentions or comments from people I know on social media. Loads of wonderful response from people all over the world who have bought the book and been in touch and praying for me, sending beautiful messages. So, they make up for all of that. And I think we just have to cast our seeds, and I think I'm seeing it with some members of my family. There's change in some of them. But yes, to answer your question, it's been quite hard in some ways, but worth it. Yeah.
Well, when we get to the end tonight, it'd be good to pray for you about that. And thank you. Yeah. That the opposition becomes doorways. And thank you. And so, yeah. So, yeah, we'll get up to pray for you. Very amazing. For those who are listening who are where you began, so maybe they have a family member who's recently become a Christian, and I think, like you thought, it's not going to last. Yeah. Or they themselves are in that position where they are, I just don't know. I just don't know, but I know there's something more than this. What would you say to them?
Well, I think to those that just don't know, like, where I was, there are answers, and they're not complicated, and they do make sense. They're logical, and they're rational, and they're scientific. If you want science, there's science that points to God. And the more we develop our science, the more it's pointing to God. So the information is out there, but I personally was educated away from the Bible, and I think we all have been, particularly throughout the 20th century. because, this idea that the Bible was written by man to control man is a myth. Absolute myth. The Bible has been educated out of us so man can control man, because the Bible is free. It gives you courage. It answers questions. It gives you hope. And these are the things, if man wants to control man, he does not want you to have. So I would say to those that are searching and are unsure, obviously, I'm going to say, buy the book. Right? This is awkward again, as Barry said. But you do get £2 off tonight, actually. Because the answers are in there. And what I do in the book is I give you the evidence. And it's not my opinion, it's real evidence that is provable and traceable. And I give, I suppose, links. I say, well, this is something about DNA, this is something about biology, this is something about the universe. If you want more information, go here, and I'll send them off in different directions so you can go on your own personal journey of discovery. And I absolutely guarantee you will find something, many things that will blow your mind and change your life. And if you don't, get in touch with me and I'll give you your money back. How's that as a guarantee, eh?
It's a pretty good guarantee. It's, I think it was a C.S. Lewis who said, Christianity, if it's not true, is of no importance whatsoever.
Yeah.
If it's true, then it is of infinite importance.
It's ultimate.
Yeah.
And C.S. Lewis, for those out there who are very suspicious about this, C.S. Lewis, one of the world's greatest academics, certainly the 20th century, was so critical, so skeptical of Christianity. He was a dyed-in-the-wool atheist until he was at Oxford University and he decided to research it for himself. Took him a few years. He even learned to speak ancient Greek, and so he could read the New Testament in its original language. I mean, I did not go that far, right? But he reluctantly, he says, came to Christianity because there was no other option, because it's true. And it is difficult in places. There are lots of things that will never be answered. But that's the mysticism of it. It has to be mystery. And it was he that said that what did he say? That if Christianity was a made-up religion, we'd make it much easier. We would. We'd fill in the gaps. We'd make some promises. We'd say everybody's saved. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do, what your thoughts are on God. You're all okay. We'd make it all up. It's tough in places, but it's a tough love. And it's a tough love that changes lives for better.
Man. And that's the big question for those who are searching. Not, do you like it? It's kind of irrelevant in a way. Is it true? Is it real? Is Jesus who he said he was? And that's the ultimate question. And you realize when you found the answer to that, it required a response from you.
It did. And also, once you realize that Jesus is who he said he was, because he proved he was God by saying he's going to resurrect. That's what the resurrection is all about. It's Jesus proving who he is. Yeah. Because don't forget, the people that followed him were doubters. Some of them called him mad. It says this in the New Testament. But he proved he was God. Once you get there, it also unravels the Bible. Because the Bible, you'll never be able to finish the Bible. I mean, they say it's the only book in the world you never finish reading it because it's so fantastic. But once you get the resurrection and creation, it means that everything in between, everything in the Bible is true. So it solves a lot of the worries about miracles or stories or whatever. If he's really God, everything in the Bible is true. And it really does shortcut it. It really does. You'd have to beat yourself up about certain passages in the Bible, which again would have been made easier and more palatable had it been a made-up religion.
Yeah, that's great. David, thank you very much for the time that you spent with us tonight.